The moment you put on that mini skirt or that crop top or that leather mini dress, you feel good, you feel hot, you feel sexy, you feel desirable. You may think this is you feeling good about yourself, but it's really just the patriarchy speaking through you. Much of fourth wave feminism equates the fact of feeling desirable in sexy attire with being feminist. This is indeed not the case. What this is doing is merely validating women through their adherence to the patriarchal standard. I'd like to outline this argument in 3 points. Firstly, by putting our sexuality on display, we are reinstilling the belief that our desirability is our inherent worth. This normalizes the patriarchal standard. Second, this eliminates the ability for women to explore their own desires and their own sexuality in a way that is outside of the patriarchal standard because they are too busy trying to fit into it. 3, feminism is meant to create tension between the norm and something beyond, and dressing hot just doesn't do that. To discuss my first point about normalizing the patriarchal standard and reinstilling the belief that our worth is our desirability, I'd like to talk about slut walks and the Femin movement. Both of these were incredibly important in discussing rape culture and the, well, what was she wearing narrative and protesting against this. But what it also did was reinstill the belief about what a slut is. I'm going to refer to her as her first name because I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but Tram quotes that, in essence, inversion leads not only to reaffirmation but also to normalization. So women would dress in very revealing attire and wear shirts that said, "This is what a slut looks like." So yes, they are calling into question the sexist label of a slut, but at the same time reinstilling it by dressing the way that a slut dresses. Teresa O'Keefe in her article also writes about the importance of bodies as a site for resistance. Bodies are powerful sites of resistance, and bodies in protest are an important source of knowledge for movement development. The centrality of the body to issues of production and reproduction means that any attempts to seek revolutionary change should take account of this and understand where best to locate the body in strategies of resistance. The body is very much a contextualized product of the relationship between capitalism, patriarchy, racism, colonialism, and other systems of oppression. So we can say all we want that we're going to dress in this sexual attire and it's feminist because we say it's feminist, but that is not disregarding the systems that are around us in place and that are evaluating us and labeling us and critiquing us. Because at the end of the day, dressing slutty is just adhering to the patriarchal standard of we need to be desirable for men. Despite the success of the Femin and Slutwalk movements in the, cases of rape culture, we can also acknowledge, as O'Keefe says, it can be argued that not only do they fail to do this adequately, they actually reinforce the original use of these signifiers in their associated norms. So, as I said previously, they're really just instilling what a slut is and reinstating that label as a way to categorize women. To discuss a more empirical example, there was a study done that talked about how faking orgasm was a believed part of just a normal heterosexual relationship for most women. This comes from a Janet Holland article, and she was studying women's pleasure in heterosexual relationships. She states, "These extracts signal a very clear definition of sex as penetrative sex for men's pleasure, in which women find fulfillment primarily in the relationship, in giving pleasure, and only secondary in their own bodily desires." To equate this to my point that I'm making about dressing for the male gaze, our first instinct at all times is to please men and to treat men and to look good for men, and we put our own desires second. I think a great example of this is how you may feel really uncomfortable in that mini skirt and your butt's going to fall out and you can't run if you need to, or the high heels are giving you blisters, but you want to look good, you want to feel good, so you wear them anyway. And I think that's a perfect example how we're going to put how we look before how we feel. And of course, this example is directly linked to sex, but I think that goes farther into more nuanced areas of our society, such as the way we are dressing in culture. My second point is that focusing on these standards eliminates the ability for women to explore their own desires and their own sexuality. This is due to the fact that we are spending our entire lives trying to fit into a mold that the patriarchy has created for us. As Peggy Ornstein says in her book Girls and Sex, the body as product, however, is not the same as the body as subject, nor is learning to be sexually desirable the same as exploring your own desire. The truth is that hot refracts sexuality through a dehumanized prism regardless of who is in control. So we can think about how we want to be perceived all the time, and we can become experts in looking hot and sexy, but that doesn't mean we know anything about our own sexuality. This comes from the Janet Holland article, which was discussing the empirical studies on women's sexuality, and she writes, young women are under pressure to construct their material bodies into a patriarchal model of femininity, which is both inscribed on the surface of their bodies through such skills as dress, makeup, and dietary regimes, and disembodies in the sense of detachment from their sensuality and alienation from their material bodies. I consider this very interesting because though we are so in tune with how we are perceived in society, we're so in tune with how to paint that brush over our face, what certain clothes look best on our particular bodies, we are yet so distuned with how we actually feel internally with our bodies and experiencing our bodies in a way that's purely for our desire. We normally only experience them for other people's desire. I wanted to do a side note about the female gaze in terms of this, and that is considered a big part of fourth wave feminism movement is you're not dressing for the male gaze anymore, you're dressing for the female gaze. And I would like to argue that the female gaze is really just a reincarnation of the male gaze, but instead it's attuned to women. So we're clapping each other on. How well did you fit into the patriarchal standard this week? You did amazing. You look incredible. Um, and so it's really not any new facet of a feminist ideal. It's really just a reinscription of the patriarchy. That brings me to my last point, which is also my conclusion, which is that feminism is meant to create tension between what is established in the norm and something beyond, something that we can hope could maybe one day be equality. Um, Feminism is supposed to create this tension, and dressing in a sexually desirable way is purely just not doing that. Men want to see that. Men want to see women in a miniskirt. We are adhering to the traditional scripts, the traditional sexual scripts that men have written for us. And whether we're doing that to feel good about ourselves or to appeal to the female gaze, we are nonetheless still adhering to the scripts and therefore still reinstating the patriarchal norm. And that is why you don't feel feminist in a miniskirt.